All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. To begin our conversation on the Cybersecurity Act, here's a background report put together by our correspondent Abraham Dan Hamidu.
The Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act, enacted by the National Assembly, prescribes various offences related to cybercrime and their corresponding penalties. Its goal is to protect individuals and businesses from cyber threats and reinforce the country's cybercrime laws. However, funding the operations of the National Cybersecurity Agency and related initiatives is crucial to achieving this goal. This is where the recent directive by the Central Bank of Nigeria of a 0.5% levy on electronic transactions comes in. Equivalent to 0.5% of all electronic transactions value, the levy is to be remitted to the National Cybersecurity Fund. The deductions are set to commence 2 weeks from now, after the 6th of May 2024 directive to financial institutions and banks in the country to implement. On the other hand, the pronouncement has received mixed reactions across Nigeria, with some hailing it as a necessary step towards combating cybercrime, while others have raised concerns about the additional burden on the banking public. As the conversation continues, one thing is clear: Nigeria's cybersecurity landscape is evolving, and this new levy is a reinforcement. Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will delve into Nigeria's Cybercrime Act and how it will secure government data as well as enhance national security.
All right, thank you very much, Ibrahim Hamidu, for that background report. And joining us right here in the studio to discuss the cybersecurity levy is Zachary Mejinyawa. He's head of strategic communication office of the National Security Advisor. A pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning to you.
All right, we have also been joined here in the studio by Dr. Chukwuemeka Ojam, MNI, IT security strategy expert and a former House of Reps member, former security architect for the Metropolitan Police in the UK, former head of designs, e-borders, UK technical architect for British Telecom, and former network consultant to Galaxy Backbone. Thank you for joining us on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good morning.
All right, also here with us to talk about the Cybersecurity Act is Jared Ilokwe, an ICT policy expert. Many thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Okay, let's begin here with Mejinyawa. As a way of laying the background and helping us understand what this is all about, what is this Cybercrime Act? And what is the Act meant to achieve? If you may, what does this 0.5% mean? What does it entail? And what's the connection?
So thank you very much for having us. It is important that we put all this into context. This journey did not start on May 6th when the CBN issued the circular. Nigeria issued its first comprehensive cybersecurity policy and strategy in 2014. That led to the enactment in 2015 of the Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act. In 2018, the CBN issued a circular for the implementation of aspects of the Cybercrime Act. Now, from 2015 up to now, there has been a series of activities in relation to implementing the law. Those within the industry understand and know about these activities. Regarding the recent amendment in 2014, it is from the observation that certain vagueness in the law in 2015 made stakeholders not to implement effectively, and the National Assembly began an amendment process. And in October, there was a call for memoranda. And in November, you can check it online, there was a public hearing of the amendment. And that was just to clarify certain aspects and to strengthen the monitoring mechanism of the law. And the President assented to it in February. So you can see that we have almost 8 to 9 years of history of the Cyber Crime Act. It did not start from yesterday. The levy has always been there. So it is implementation that is being strengthened now. So basically, if you look at the law, especially around Part 3, you can see major administrative and coordination mechanism developed. The role of the Office of the National Security Advisor is actually to help to coordinate security, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies in their cyber security activities. So also other law enforcement and security agencies, they have key responsibilities. Additionally, a National Cyber Security Advisory Council has been formed, and it has been holding meetings over the years. In fact, the Act requires that it meets at least 4 times in a year. And if you look at the membership of the council, it involves both federal and private sector involvement. The Auditor General of the Federation audits the Cybersecurity Fund. The Attorney General of the Federation, that's the Minister of Justice, ensures Nigeria's compliance with international cybersecurity laws and crime. So you put it into context and you see that cyber crime and cybersecurity is actually beyond national security. It is the foundation of international security today. It supports our digital economy. And with recent happening around cryptocurrency and the volume of threats emerging, you will see that there is supposed to be deepen more discussion on this, and that more Nigerians should read the law and really appreciate what the purpose is. Thank you.
All right, Mejinyua, I'd like you to speak to us about Section 44 of this Act specifically. And then, my colleague mentioned the 0.5% levy, which the CBN directive actually talks about. But, there's been a lot of figures in the public domain. I think I've seen 0.005% coming from a president's aide. So speak to us exactly about the real figure and then what Section 44 actually says in clear terms.
So Section 44, in order to implement the Act, establish a National Cybersecurity Fund to be domiciled with the CBN. This fund is intended to support, to build resiliences around our cybersecurity architecture. More specifically, our critical national information infrastructure, which the Act has designated and called for gazetting. Now, the fund itself in Section 44.2a creates a levy of 0.005. I wish you were able to put it up.
0.005.
0.005.
Specifically from the banking transactions.
I will get there now. If you read a levy of 0.005 of electronic transactions by the specified businesses listed in the second schedule. So you go over and read what is in the second schedule. And there are about 6 entities: banks and financial institutions, internet service providers, the stock exchange, GSM, telecommunication companies. So that is what the second schedule says, specified businesses. Now, what brought about the vagueness and the weakness in implementation is that across industry, it was seen that within the legislative drafting, the sign percentage was not indicated. And several efforts and letters, sensitization, created that a bit of lacuna. To be clear, this fund already exists with the CBN, and there has been some remittances over the years, but it hasn't.
From where?
From the banking sector.
Transactions?
Yes.
Unknown to Nigerians?
No, not unknown to Nigerians, because this is a public document. If you Google now, you will see the CBN circular of 2018. In fact, there are 2 circulars. One regarding the directive to implement. The second one further clarifying on what the circular is. So it's about checking up the data and reading up. It's online. You can check it up. So, but to go about the act and why there was an amendment. Now, because of that vagueness of what does 0.005% means, then the National Assembly, in order to correct this, now started the amendment in October. And the objective was to clarify, to add that percentage sign.
So what is the figure now?
So the figure now in the 2024 is 0.5%. That's half percent. And using your mathematics, is 0.5 times 1 over 100. That's what? 2 zeros. 0.005. So the same value of the levy in 2015 is what is present in 2024. Because all you did was to add percentage. 0.5% is the same thing as 0.005.
Now, you say that this levy has been deducted, you know, has been in effect.
Yes.
Could you speak to us really about, because I can also see some publications saying that there are exemptions and all of that. Speak to us about the category of people affected, or if you like, businesses affected by this levy, and those that are exempted.
Well, yeah, of course, I'm not a financial expert, neither am I regulatory or CBN, but again, this is a public document, and it was issued on May 6. And this circular referred to an Appendix 1. And the Appendix 1 is a list of 16 exemptions. And if you look at these exemptions, you will see that salaries are exempted. You will see that educational, like school fees, exempted. Social investment programs, benefits are exempted. I'm sure others can speak specifically about the banking and other interbank exemptions. But there are 16 items which is online, is in the website of the CBN, that have been exempted from this. So probably, you know, given the technicalities, it all needs to be put in a language that is comprehensible and that is understandable for the majority of Nigerians.
You know why this has become, I mean, many say it's not a problem to want to deter cyber criminals, for instance. But why this has become such a big issue is that it is being drawn, the levies are drawn from a banking public that already feel that there's so much already been taken from them by way of deductions. That's why this is a problem. It's not a problem fighting, you know, cybercrime. That's not a problem at all. It is the source of funding that is the problem. And then, if you have a percentage, some of us are poor students of mathematics, so you pardon us. So if we put it in context, what is 0.005% of 1,000 naira, for instance?
0.05%.
Okay, 0.0 now.
And that is why we should talk more about Section 44. Because there are many other sources of funds to the National Cybersecurity Fund. It is not only the levy. There are gifts and donations from multilateral organizations. There is any appropriation by the National Assembly. There is also a lot of other sources that government may determine. For example, within the Act, there are certain punishments, you know, that are accruable through maybe judgments or certain government, private sectors not undertaking certain responsibilities, so they are charged. So the fund has many other sources. And then Section 44.5 now said that the fund may be utilized, at least 40% may be utilized for programs relating to counter-terrorism and violent extremism.
I think I want to pause you at this point. We'll definitely come back to you. But let's get to Dr. Ujam now. You are an IT security strategy expert, and then you have experience not just in Nigeria, but outside the country. Yep. Speak to us about this act as a Nigerian. Do you really think that the components of this act, you know, has what it takes to secure, if you like, government data, improve national security, and affect the average Nigerian on the street listening to you at this point?
So thank you. Well, the short answer is yes. It's certainly, I've read the act. It's a robust act and it's a starting point, it's a good starting point, a basis for Nigeria to start protecting its cyber assets. But let me digress a bit. Your co-anchor did say that many people are poor mathematicians. And so let's get it right, what is written there. 0.5% is the same thing as 0.005. Stop. Don't add percent to 0.005.
Okay. Okay.
So we must distinguish that. 0.5% is the same in value as 0.005. I didn't say percent.
Okay.
So we must distinguish that. Now, is this global best practice? Most certainly. In foreign climes, this kind of levy is masked under digital service tax. So that such deductions exist. Do we need to protect our assets? Most definitely. I've been in a different forum and I've said protecting our assets is an expensive venture, but it is a necessary venture. We cannot run away from it. What the common man identifies as cybercrime is attack on his or her financial, transactions. But there are a myriad of other things. The National Security Advisor's Office is overseeing so many other things that the Nigerian public do not see. Let me go the way of extreme nuclear warfare. Yes, we're not, I won't stray into things that, nuclear armament, but that's one area you can protect. Integrity of our computer systems. We do not want foreign intelligence agencies snooping in on our conversations. We're a sovereign nation, so we should be able to protect ourselves. So that's cyber, and we are continuously under attack. It's just that the public do not know that. And for as long as you wake up every morning and everything is stable, you don't think that there are people behind the scenes working very hard to protect you.
Other clients that you're talking about now, yeah. do they raise funds for this cyber security from the banking sector, just like we're trying to do now?
So as I said, it is masked. Some countries mask it under the digital service tax. So it is a charge on transactions.
Banking transactions?
Yes, banking transactions.
All right, we'll get back to you.
Let me stay a bit with him.
Okay.
Now, let me call you honorable for the first time today, because that part appears to be getting lost. You were a member of the House of Reps.
Yes, I was.
And you understand the workings of the legislature. You have a sense of it, even if you are not there today. So why do you think that the legislators who themselves made this law a reality are now saying, stop now, don't implement?
So, you see, as a legislator, you are representing people. You have a constituency. So it is very likely, and let's not shy away from the fact that truly the public are shouting, and the public have their representatives. And so all they're doing is echoing what their constituents are telling them. But the fact still remains, is it necessary for us to protect our cyber infrastructure? Yes. Do we need to fund it? Of course. So my colleagues in the National Assembly are just echoing what they have to do that for their constituents to see that they're representing them.
So you don't think it's the right thing to do?
That what is not the right
what
thing
the reps
to
are
do?
doing?
Oh, no,
asking for a halt?
That's their job. That's their job. They can ask for a halt, but that, it was passed by them. So they're not asking for a halt.
But they did say somewhere that it's not as it was passed. What is passed is not what is being implemented. It appears that some things are now alien to the law that they passed.
Well, that would be very strange, because both chambers would have passed it and sent to Mr. President for assent. Remember, this is just an amendment to an existing act of
All
Parliament.
right, Dr. Ujam, thank you so much. Jared Ilukwe, you have listened to the conversation. I'm sure you have seen the act yourself. But you see, what comes to my mind at this point is the fact that electronic payment transactions hit an all-time high in 2023, from 55% to about 600 trillion naira, compared to 387 trillion naira in 2022. That is huge. Now, do you see this directive affecting electronic transactions and if you like, by extension, the cashless policy of the federal government? I say this because, like my colleague already mentioned, there's so many charges going on with online transactions these days, if you like, suffocating Nigerians. With this new levy, will Nigerians breathe?
Nice question. So I'll take it this way. There's a lot of uproar. I mean, everybody on social media, on conventional media, about the levy. But ultimately, things will settle. What is the cost of cash, both in real terms and in conceptual terms? How many of us remember when you would have to go somewhere, especially with the inflationary environment today? Do you really want to be carrying around a bundle of cash? Yes, the economy is going through a period, but if you revert to cash, are you going to solve one problem and start a bigger problem? How many people get robbed? Yes, there's crime and everything. When you were carrying cash, what was the probability of being robbed? If you broke into a store or a pharmacy or a shop and you said, where's all your cash? The criminal who is intending to go into a store today, what are his chances of coming out with a lot of cash? So the reversal, there is a risk of it, but in my own conviction, it will settle back down. Okay? That's a totally separate conversation. But yes, it is one of the things people are saying that, oh, they would lose, the CBN or the financial system will lose some ground in its direction towards going cashless. And by the way, there's something I read yesterday. I didn't quite go through the whole story, but there's something about China, which is the second largest economy in the world today, having to retweak some of its cashless policies. So these things should be put in the right categories. You know what I mean? Yes, there will be some unintended consequences back and forth, but I personally do not think it will significantly affect the cashless policy.
Now, will the revenues, collected from the cybercrime solely go towards, enhancing cybersecurity? How will it translate, for instance, to tangible improvements in the nation's digital ecospace? Okay,
so first of all, just a fairly significant note of correction. You said solely. Yeah. I remember that Mr. Mijin Yawa pointed out to the 40% that is going to be used towards terrorism-related activities. Okay, so it's not solely. Okay, now, back to your question. How will it translate tangibly? Individuals and corporates alike, every day, as we speak, are losing money to cybercrime. I have a very close friend of mine who, a few years ago, lost 26 million naira over a 24-hour period through 25 transactions on his account. And I mean, this is somebody I know, and he had to go back and forth. The only reason why he got his money back from the bank was that he was able to prove to the bank that he had, this was his business account, that he had a certain daily limit on his transactions. So I gave you a daily limit. How did we cross this daily limit? And you say it's my fault. I didn't change my daily limit. This is somebody I know. I know a corporate, a significant corporate in this country, that in the last 1 year lost 38 billion naira to cyber fraud. 38 billion naira of either customers' money or shareholders' money or money on the bottom line. So in one form or the other, everybody is affected. There are people, every time you get one message or the other said, you have won this, you have won that. Do you know how many people who think it's their lucky day and they click on it? And even if they don't lose money, they are now subject to a phishing attack. The health sector in Nigeria today, I think they launched something about digital health initiative. Now, imagine how we migrate your hospital records and my hospital records to a national online system, okay? And then all of a sudden, your records are public consumption. Forget even the financial crime. In more developed climes, the most vital information is your personal information, especially your health information, your health records. With this act and the faithful implementation of the provisions of it in terms of funding cybersecurity, right? You're going to have systems that are secure by design. Anybody in technology will tell you that the fundamental of technology is secure by design. So you have built it by design. You're not running after, how do you say, you're not closing the gate after the horse has bolted. So there are elements of this. So maybe we need to, amplify the benefits in the long term. Nigeria today ranks number 5 in incidents of cybercrime globally after Russia, Ukraine, China, and the United States. You can understand the other 4 countries. Why should we be number 5 in cybercrime?
What are the biggest cybercrime threats in Nigeria?
The biggest cybercrime, of course, we talked about cyber fraud. That's mainly in its various manifestations, either and then you have the normal ones of malware, okay, which are international threats. And another one that people tend to not notice, not be fully aware of, is the number of advisories that Nigeria receives saying you have become a base, and it's actually another form of malware. So people clone Nigerian servers and use Nigeria as a base to launch attacks into other countries. So Nigeria gets blacklisted. Meanwhile, the person who is using Nigeria is somewhere in Eastern Europe. You see, but uses the Nigerian server, gets access to a Nigerian server, and launches an attack in Western Europe or America. And they say, oh, Nigeria has done it again. So we need, at various layers, to strengthen our cyber defenses.
Now, listening to you and some of these cyber threats you've mentioned, do you think that the banking transactions should be the target for funding, such?
Again, we like Dr. Ujam has said, we should not limit this conversation to banking. I just talked about healthcare. Another thing you have to understand, which is what I am personally passionate about, is capacity building. Even within our own economy, our own national landscape, do we have enough cybersecurity and general information technology experts? Do you know how much people spend, governments and private sector, how much is spent on implementing cybersecurity and other IT systems that goes out of the country? We're talking about Nigeria bleeding foreign exchange. Why can we not develop our own internal capacity? It is written very boldly in that act. It emphasizes capacity building in the national intelligence, security and defense, and emphasizes public-private partnerships. You have all the Kaspersky's and all the other software. Outside of the banking system, what world-class software have we built in Nigeria? Do you think that the IT associations in this country cannot come to the federal government and say, look, we demand that a certain percentage of your cybersecurity investments be made in local companies? You cannot quantify that. You cannot quantify the value that gives you. So we have to walk our talk. We keep talking about local capacity building. And at the end of the day, NOTAP and CBN are being asked to sign this document that says you can go and get foreign exchange, and CBN or whatever, I think it keeps changing. It's saying, yes, we need to ship money abroad, send money to South Africa, send money to Israel, or you want to buy from Juniper, you want to buy from, there's so many of them out there. Why can we not begin? This is software. It's not even hardware. It's not precision engineering. Why can we not begin to develop some of these applications and processes in-house, in-country.
All right, Gerard, let's hold you on there and get back to the controversy. Zachary, you see, I was asking earlier, I didn't quite get that, but let me put it this way. With the latest directive, would you then say that 1,000 naira transaction will attract 5 naira levy? 100,000 naira attracts 50 naira?
10,000.
Is that it?
10,000 would attract 50 naira.
Or 10,000 naira, you know, and so on. Right? Am I right?
Well, what I can talk to you is about what the law says.
Okay. You can
And the
talk to me
policy.
about the figures.
Yes, there is a circular and there is an interpretation, and I'm sure between the regulators and the stakeholders, they can determine what that law
What the
means
figure will come
and what it really would be,
How much
especially
do
since
you-
it is something that has been in existence.
How much do you intend to rake in from these deductions, from the levy? And how much is it that we are trying to save? You know, can we strike that balance?
You see, at the policy and strategic level, what we have is a plan to build a cyber security and digital safety future for Nigeria.
Okay.
Because you are in a certain state of development does not mean that you should not have ambitions. You need to see the sheer investment other countries make in terms of cybersecurity. And we have just heard that Nigeria is 5th. And to add to that, in hosting cyber criminals around the world. So it took 5 years of serious work in terms of legislation, training, capacity building, including setting up the computer emergency and response management system, a forensic computer laboratory for Nigeria to ascend to the Budapest Convention. A group of 66 countries that are connected by that convention that work together to promote cybersecurity. So I cannot sit here and give you figures, but I can talk to you about the plans. It is the accountants and the holders of the funds that are best to give you figures.
Now, you said you can talk to us about the plans and talk to us about the law. Is there any provision, you know, to ensure that there's accountability in this whole process? Because, of course, that's one worry on the minds of Nigerians. It's not about getting in the money. It's about doing what you want to do exactly for the benefit of Nigerians without it being diverted. So what are the plans in that regard?
So, well, the law had an inbuilt accountability process. One, the Auditor General of the Federation will audit and provide guideline for the administration of that account. The fund is with the CBN. So, as the banker of government, they do their normal administrative, regulatory, and financial work and keeping all the records. What the NSA does, as the chair of the National Cybersecurity Council, is to administer in terms of prioritization, in terms of identifying the risk assessments, supporting law enforcement that have generated their needs. For example, now, we have a robust plan for police reform.
Okay.
We are weak in terms of our digitization of the security sector. If we think of the investment that is required in the next 5-10 years, just in terms of camera system, do we even begin to contemplate how much this in terms of naira? So all these kind of reforms will be determined through the meetings of the advisory council. And if you look at the list of the advisory council members, there are directorate level officers from all relevant ministries, including the banks, the internet service providers. So there is already a transparent process that the fund will be administered, or is being administered. So this openness and this mechanism will ensure that there is no problem. And just to add to you, the current NSA, you all know his history. I don't think we should fear that Malam Nuhu Ribadu would oversee a heist. If it did, this is the fair. He said he was the pioneer EFCC chairman. Recently, you might have seen abroad, Mr. President mentioned this, that this is one person that has the integrity and the support. And indeed, we have an opportunity to build the foundations that we have required all these years in terms of national security. And a lot of work is being done. And that is why it must not be misconstrued that the fund is only specific to cyber security in that context. Because as at the time this law was made, we were at the heat of insurgency and terrorism in the Northeast. We seem to forget. And recently, all this has expanded into the Northwest. Even kidnapping for ransom, for example. So a lot of the solutions we require and the asset that organized criminal groups use is actually cyber related. And that is why we must transition and properly build the infrastructure. So this work is as important as building bridges, building water systems, and all the infrastructure we talk about. Because that is where we live now, and that is where the world is.
Okay, let me ask, thank you very much for the clarification you're making. Let me ask Ujam, if you have an opportunity to speak with your colleagues at the House of Reps, for instance, if you find yourself in the Green Chamber, what would you be advising them given the situation at the moment, the directive that has been given from that end to halt implementation? What would be your advice? How do you strike a balance? Because you have admitted that they have to do right by their people, by their constituents. And so, what would you do?
So the first thing I'll do is to advise my colleagues to actually study and understand the positives of the bill or the act that we passed. And I will also do so by maybe creating scenarios. So for instance, an example of a cyber attack could be hijacking a telecommunication system and sending narrative that can make, cause enormous problems for the country. So for instance, as we're here having a friendly conversation, an attacker can hijack this conversation, create its own content, send out the narrative, and people are watching and think they're watching this program live. That's an instance of cyber attack. So you can imagine people are tuned into NTA and are watching a content, and the narrative is being sent out, and that narrative can burn the country, and people think they're really watching a live program. One of the essence of this cyber security act is to make sure that we secure everybody's computer system, to make sure that I know there's a part of it that goes into capacity building, training, understanding the threat environment and how to mitigate those threats.
How would you know?
Sorry.
Okay.
So you see, the cost of preventing such a scenario from occurring is unquantifiable, because you can imagine the kind of content that will go out and people are on the streets not knowing it's a false narrative that was being sent out.
Dr. Jam, I agree that this act has a lot of merits in terms of, cybersecurity and all of that we have mentioned on the program. Yeah. But looking at the economy at this point in time, removal of subsidy on fuel, electricity, inflation, minimum wage is yet to be implemented. We're yet to even hear a figure and all of that. Do you really think that the timing is right?
So, honestly, there will never be a good time. So the time is now. There will never be a good time. No one wants to pay. I don't want to pay more money on anything. If I can get away with avoiding, everybody will want to avoid taxation of any form. But the response to you would be, well, if you halt now and there's an attack, what happens? You would regret not paying. So, as I said, the time is now. There's never going to be a good time.
But how do you strike the balance with their own concerns of this being an additional economic burden on Nigerians?
So remember, there are about 16 or 15 exemptions, and those exemptions do cover a wide range of activities that the populace. I mean, your salaries are not affected.
Yeah, salaries are not affected, but you then, every transaction, let's say you get salary at the end of the month and it's okay, I need to pay Yenre for something, I pay and it is taken. I pay him, it's taken, I pay him. So one way short and 5, 10, 15 ways open.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, academic, for instance, school fees, those are protected. If there's one area that I'll be suggesting, it would be maybe the healthcare area, if that could come into the exemption list. Aside that.
Now, but what do we have a way of checking these things, these exemptions? You just talked about school fees. Like, I want to do a transaction, for example.
Yep.
I mean, I want to pay to, I mean, how do you know it's school fees? How do you know that this is healthcare? How do you know that, I'm trying to pay my staff salary and all of that?
So remember that it's actually CBN that released its the latest circular. So there are, of course, in talks with the various banks, microfinance banks and all that. When you're paying a school, it's a known account. It's not, you're not paying an individual, it's a school. The school registers CAC. Before you open an account, you know what the account is for. So, I mean, we've passed that level of not knowing where we're paying or who we're paying. What you can stress is that it's a lot of work now for the banks to be able to distinguish accounts and make sure that those exemptions are applied. So yes,
All right, Majinwa, I want to quickly get to you. You talked about the plans, when this money begins to come in and all of that. Are there specific targets, or if you like, benchmarks, that the government has put in place to measure the effectiveness of this levy in terms of improving cybersecurity?
Yes. The policy and strategy set up a National Cyber Security Coordination Center. That center has also other assets, for example, the NGSATs, the forensic laboratory, and one area of critical importance is actually also strengthening the prosecution of cybercrime, because we have not really looked at the criminology in there. And these are issues that directly affect Nigerians. And the police continue to get a lot of reports. Like the issue he mentioned, the act specifically criminalizes the publication of xenophobic and hate speech with certain sentences, with or without options of fine. We're Africans, we remember Radio Rwanda and all the genocide that took place. The threat is even more now. So that is in one area. Daily criminal responses. The police cybercrime unit continue to get issues of defamation, issues of pornographic and child pornography. So these are real life issues beside the Yahoo and all that. Secondly, there is the risk to the financial sector, and risk assessments have been conducted, and the threat is real. And that is why it is the responsibility of government to prevent and to protect. Building a secure technology around our internet system is a national security priority. It goes to the integrity of the country itself. Over-reliance on foreign countries and companies would not unleash the potential that Nigeria is known for. So there is a serious plan to build and strengthen own cyber security assets. Then there is protection of the critical national infrastructure. These attacks keep going on. Ransomware alone is a key threat. People have reported how their whole systems have been taken over. So increase in protection is a key target in that. Then that 40% that has been mentioned by Section 44.5, and we must see that we have degraded Boko Haram, but the ideology is still very potent. We see what is happening around the Sahel and around the world. And it remains the objectives, even within the United Nations counter-terrorism strategy, that we must counter online radicalization. It is all through the phone and through over the internet that we get these threats. For how long have we fought Boko Haram? How many years have we spent fighting, losing our armed forces and security personnel? So by dedicating this aspect of the fund, Nigeria will be able to, for example, issues of recovery by affected communities is key, issues of de-radicalization programs, issues of community engagement, issues of even deepening our unity and ensuring that we are productive. That's another aspect. Then there is whole section on protecting the digital economy. Nigeria is transitioning. The current Minister of Communication has spoken a lot about this. There is a robust plan to transition Nigeria into that. And already our youth populations are adept at technology. And we have seen over the years how some have gone into cybercrime. How do we provide positive diversions for them and their talents? It was reported in the news how the EFCC's chairman met a 17-year-old who was able to get into his phone and all that. So all this talent must not be allowed for organized criminals to take over. So there is a whole plan for example, an academy that would train our youth so that they can tap into the global economy in a positive manner. You must have followed recently the case around cryptocurrency and the volume of money in dollars that had passed through the Nigerian economy. You know, it is one point that really impacted negatively on the economy and on the dollar. At a point through the tradings of some of these cryptocurrencies, the dollar was 1,900. So meaning that at every material point, you are being affected negatively in terms of your economic wherewithal without you even realizing. So just 2-3 people getting an app, trading in cryptocurrency and determining the value of the naira. What else is a threat to national security than this? So the plan is there. The NCCC exists. It is staffed, and these trainings are ongoing. And sometimes you just need to Google. If you're interested, you will see what has been done over the last 8 years. But the point is, it has not been enough because of this lack of resources. And this is where we need to take the step forward and implement it effectively.
I just wanted to ask, sorry, now that you've mentioned, is there a role for the Ministry of Digital Economy in all of this?
Yes, yes. They are part of the National Advisory Council. They sit in the National Advisory Council. And they deal with a lot of other assets. For example, the NCC is a critical stakeholder and work closely with the Office of the National Security Advisor. But again, you see, I do know that some of this conversation is high up there. But if you look at, for example, just the United States Cybersecurity Command, you see major generals, rear admirals sitting. These are cyber warfare experts, because your the new war is a cyber war. Whether it is within the Air Force, whether it is within the Navy, it is those algorithms, that mega computing strength, that determines your power and your resilience and your protection. And that is why, while US is the world power, you see that their investment, I think in the year 2024, almost around $80 billion is projected just for cybersecurity. But you find China almost as just over $11 billion. UK and Japan at around $8 billion or so. So Nigeria, more than 200 million people, the largest black country in the world, about 4 or 5 in GDP in Africa. And with all our challenges, Nigerians have been doing greatly. We have the assets, the human resource all over the world. Some of this coding, the best experts around the world are Nigerians. So, but what do we do at home? So it's a journey that is just beginning, and if we do not move quickly and do this, then we will not be able to utilize the opportunities that exist in the future.
Many thanks, Zachary. Jared, quickly get to you. When Zachary imagined what was listing the items which the levy would address, he mentioned the financial sector. And you also mentioned, some of the experiences of people that in terms of, their funds in some financial institutions. And that leads me to wonder, or if you like, makes me to ask you, if it is the duty of government to protect the financial institutions from threats, if you like, cyber security threats. From what you have mentioned, and then in some quarters, it is stated that the staff, or if you like, of these institutions are complicit in some of these acts and may not necessarily be from outside. So talk to us about that. Shouldn't the financial institutions take up the burden, considering the fact that they charge so much, maintenance charge and all of that? They have funds to strengthen their cyber system so that the funds of their clients are safe.
Okay. Like Dr. Ujam said, the short answer could be a yes, but it's one of the realities of the environment is that we cannot just make these direct connections, right? The banks have the responsibility. Now, anybody would tell you, for example, let me just give you what's happening today. Anybody would tell you that the banks today are bleeding talent. Okay, they're losing people, jacked by everybody's, the core, especially in IT. Anybody who is qualified in technology today can get a job outside the country. So sometimes putting these structures in place, even within the banking systems, are not right. They don't have the human capital to do that. I've stressed the human capital element. It's not a journey that you can say, okay, the bank is responsible. The CBN itself is the regulator of the banking sector. Okay, the CBN issues lots of guidelines. There are lots of industry standards. There's something called PCI DSS, around and other things for financial systems like card issuance and the rest of them. All these things, Dr. Jam said, technology and the guidelines around technology are not cheap. What I would rather say is, how can this fund be used to strengthen the entire banking system? You cannot blame the bank. We've talked about that one, but let me just pivot a little bit. You cannot blame the bank for MMM. People give money to these people on their own volition. That is pure cybercrime. Okay? Even the capacity to identify, prosecute, and recover and convict. We don't have it in Nigeria. We don't have enough of it. There are scams happening every moment, everywhere. Okay, yes, the banks have the responsibility. Okay, but what would we rather do? Secure the system, the economy, or point fingers in one direction to say, oh, Bank A or Bank B, I lost my money. Okay, there is also, these are cases that I mean, the ones I know. There are also cases where the individual is not aware enough. You and I know that. There are people, I've had people who, for want of a better thing to say, who due to lack of exposure have been conned. Oh, your father died and left you this amount of money. And you're believing a miracle or believing this thing that, oh yes, it is true. And all the signs are there. These guys have gone onto the internet, copied and pasted company logos and written letters, and you come out and they hand it to you, and the unsuspecting citizen falls prey. It happens on the internet, it happens everywhere. Okay, how do we build a national awareness? So I would stress, apart from capacity building in terms of skills development, I would also stress awareness building, because maybe we're not conscious of it, but we are really on fast track into being a digital economy. We're telling the youth to look for other means of livelihood. There are people who are now shopping, who are now creatives online. They're doing shopping, they're doing everything. Instagram. How many people have ordered on Insta? And as soon as they've made their orders. I know somebody who ordered on Instagram and the site went down. There's nobody to reach. You know, I give common man examples, but because we need to be able to relate these examples to why this act and this fund exists. When that happens, who is your recourse? Is it the Consumer Protection Commission, or is it the bank? Or are you left to your own fate and you say, oh, I wish I had known? You know, those monies are lost. The person who says 7,000 naira, order it, you order a belt online, or you order a fabric or something online, or even food, and you don't get it. Okay, so there is an ecosystem that is being built that has to be protected. That's what, you know, yeah, the banks are the hub of they are the center of everything. But there are certain things the banks cannot, there are certain transactions that the banks cannot be held responsible for. You know, you can even talk about I think there's supposed to be some insurance in place for USSD transactions. Yes, but there are certain, all those transactions are not covered. So you're better off building your capacity to forestall
such occurrences. Thank you so much, Gerard. Let's take a break. The conversation continues. Yeah. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. Our guests are still very much with us. We're talking about the Cyber Security Act. Before we went on that break, Gerard responded, to the reason government should take up, the responsibility of strengthening our cyberspace, just to ensure that Nigerians are safe in totality. And Zachary Mijinyawa wanted to respond to a point made by Gerard. So let's hear you.
So we must appreciate that in the same way that the federal government of Nigeria has a responsibility to protect and to defend the territorial integrity of Nigeria, that is how it has the responsibility to protect and defend the cyberspace. It is that significant. Furthermore, it is also the responsibility of the federal government to protect individuals, entities, corporate bodies doing business in Nigeria, whether they are local or foreign. This adds up to our cybersecurity and assures businesses and investment globally. So the government cannot leave the private sector alone to manage or to handle cybersecurity in its entirety. And that is why in the Act itself, there is a requirement upon banking sector and other stakeholders to report incidences of cyber attacks. And it's actually an offense with a fine of about 2 million or so if any institution fails to report to the Nigerian Computer Emergency Response Coordination Center of any incidents, so government is integral to this, and we are implementing a national security strategy. This national security strategy has already identified economic security, financial security as integral to our national security priorities. So it is absolutely necessary. Looking at the Act, where issues like cyber terrorism was identified, and if anyone uses a computer network or system to commit a cyber terrorist act, it's actually life imprisonment. So this is how serious this. So you just imagine that we are transitioning all that we know that is physical into the cyberspace. It is that important.
Now, so if you go with all of this, would you be advocating, for instance, a similar pattern of funding for physical security, which you and I can see and relate with? Not everybody understands the cyber thing, but would you be advocating similar pattern of funding for physical security, maybe to the Nigerian Police Force, for instance?
Well, this is a matter that policy strategy people and even the relevant committees in the National Assembly can look at. What is important is that as a country, we must be able to have a strategic plan of action and be very clear about the costs of implementing that action and identify sources to fund it, whether it is direct appropriation, whether it is levies, whether it is donor support. We must be able to have a basket that identifies this. I do know that over time we have education tax and all this, but it's for the legislature or the policy people to look at the whole gamut of the plan and actually determine what box to put it. In other countries around Europe, they do this, and maybe you find that there is a lump sum of a tax, but then it is later disaggregated into certain chunks.
All right, Zachary, thank you. Dr. Ujam, I would like to find out from you, because some people in some quarters have said that instead of government to go the way of taxes and levies and all of that, maybe government should look at ways to, find a way to harness our natural resources. Every day on a daily basis, we hear stories of mineral resources being, moved from, exploited from this country, and Nigeria, our government is not, leveraging on that, to be able to raise income and be able to take care of certain things. Do you think that the way of levies and taxes is a better way to harnessing our potential as a people, agricultural, mineral resources and all of that, to be able to get all that we require to do certain things, especially the cybersecurity issue?
So the easiest way for government to get money is through taxation. That's it's just there. That's how most governments make. Aside, for instance, in Nigeria, where we're blessed with crude that we sell, other resources that we sell. Taxation is synonymous with government. It's just hand in hand. That's how they make money. But I think we're mixing things. If we want to increase our revenue base by protecting our natural resources, making sure, so for instance, what happens in certain states where, yes, it is known that some of the mineral resources are being carted away, unaccounted for, that's a known problem, and therefore government should channel its energy to solving that problem. And in solving that problem, the net effect would be greater income into the coffers of government. And once government has more money, it then has more money to do solve other issues. But the world over, there's always taxation. What we should be looking for, and you did ask that question earlier on, and I was excited about it. It's just more about, let's be sure that there's proper accountability of whatever resource comes into government. So I've looked through the list of the advisory council, And the membership is quite robust, and for as long as they do their duty, Nigerians will feel the net positive effect.
Now, would you think that should the National Assembly have oversight rights over this fund?
So, National Assembly won't have oversight over a particular fund. They'll have oversight over whatever department is managing that fund. So you know, there is a committee that interfaces with the NSA's office, and the NSA does come to the National Assembly to answer questions on certain issues. So if the National Assembly feel that the fund is being mismanaged, they will call the National Security Advisor, and they will hold a discussion. That's their job. It's a check and balance scenario.
All right, Zachary, imagine you. I want to ask you this question, and that's because it's a source of concern, and it's been reported in some quarters that away from the cybersecurity levy, there's also this telecommunications tax that is about to come on board by government, and that there are other fiscal measures the government is planning to put in place as a requirement for a $750 million loan from the World Bank. Is that report true?
I do not know. I'm not aware.
All right. Okay,
let me ask Gerard. Can you put a figure to it? I mean, how much can we estimate to be lost to cyber crimes in a year, for instance?
Okay. I have, the economy has grown. I can give you two figures, and one is an extrapolation. There's an article, a professional online publication, professional publication that says that as of 2018, Nigeria had lost $800 million to cybercrime. Now, if you compound that, let's say, even at a 3% rate, okay, per annum, we'll be coming close to 3 to 5% rate, we'll be coming close to $900 to $1 billion. In
2024.
2023, you know, so that's a figure. Then I think I read something last year where the Senate narrowed it, was specific, and spoke about $500 million. Okay, now this is that was cyber fraud, not crime, because fraud is one crime.
Crime encompasses
all. You know what I mean? So we're looking at least in the very least $1 billion a year, in the very least.
And then how much are we likely to rake in for, you know, in a year from this fund?
That would be left to the CBN for the simple reason that they have the 16 exemptions. So you cannot just do a straight line 5.5% of the volume. You have to now factor, again, that is what there has to be a little bit of rigor. What we're seeing now is knee-jerk rejection. No, it's one more. You see, and in a sense, both sides are correct. I'm a citizen of Nigeria as well, and I live here and I work here. You can say, oh, you've done this to me, you've done this to me, you've done this to me. Okay?
And you want to do this to me.
And you want to do this to me. But this person is saying, this is my job. My job is to keep you secure. Okay? My job is not to put petrol in your tank and how much it costs to put petrol in your tank. My job is to keep you secure, because you know what? If you are not secure, you'll not even be able to travel on that road that you put petrol there. Okay? Somebody says there's what they call food inflation. Where is there food inflation? Can you relate food inflation to terrorism activities? And if you can, then you should be able to relate food inflation to this act. Because there is food inflation, because the Middle Belt and the Northwest, the agricultural economy, you know, the agri sector has lost a lot. People can't go to farm. Now, you're talking about, I don't know who spoke about minerals.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah,
do you know, and I'm sure you do, because this is your profession, that there is a relationship between illegal mining and terrorism funding?
Of course.
Who are the guys in Zamfara who have taken control of all those areas? And what are they doing? there are state and non-state actors who are involved in this. Foreign state actors and non-state actors locally who are funding. So when you deal with terrorism, then you can improve your capacity to derive revenue from your extractive minerals. We need to connect those dots. We're not connecting the dots.
And that's why I was asking earlier, that's why I asked Mijin Yawa earlier, if you are going to also advocate that kind of funding for physical security, which you
well,
and I
that's where
can
the
see
40%
and
is coming in. To be honest with you, I listened to that question, and I thought somebody, because it's been online, and said, tomorrow they're going to give us another tax for, you know, I think that's what I understood, that if you create a cyber security tax, tomorrow you can...
Banditry tax.
Yeah? Banditry tax, and this tax. No, but there, it's in that context, which you have now explained what you meant, that is what we seem to, in each, especially people who live in Abuja and Lagos, we seem to underestimate what people go through. You're dealing with, just to give you an, every corner of this country. I'm from the southeast. There are parts of the southeast that people are scared of going. Northeast, northwest, north central, parts of the, I mean the south, parts of the southwest 2-3 years ago was on fire. So there we have a national terrorism problem. We have our cybersecurity issues, but I also stress the terrorism component. Because if you want to talk to the common man, the so-called common man, might say, I'm not online. I'll tell you something. Sorry, let me just drop this. I know that telecoms companies today are not able to build infrastructure. I know of an infrastructure provider who went into somewhere in the north central in partnership with the state government. Okay? The government spent a lot of money, the Kaduna state government to be precise, trying to expand telecommunications into all parts of the state. And the objective was two things: security and financial inclusion. To be able to get people, this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, okay, to drive financial inclusion. As they were building some of these base stations, they were getting burnt down. In some instances, a few lives were lost. So the objective was to reach a certain near to 100% coverage, digital coverage of the state, for financial inclusion and security. Because the NSA and the people in the security services will tell you, two components of security are communication and mobility. So when you degrade communication, you cannot report something, and so you cannot have people cannot even respond. Okay, we're talking about cameras. Okay, the world today is driven by digital surveillance and the intelligent analytics that goes behind digital surveillance. Everything that is electronic can be hacked. We do not fully appreciate how pervasive. We are at bubbling around 4,200 megawatts for the last 20 years. Nigeria's minimum power requirement is 20,000 megawatts by my own reckoning. By the time you begin to implement these power systems, how much technology in telemetry and all these systems that you need, can somebody hack into your electricity system, into your central command center in Osogbo?
All right, because of time, Gerard, I think we'll have to leave the conversation at this point. But just allow Zachary say his final thoughts on this levy in 30 seconds.
Definitely, the law is what we have. Cyber crime and cyber security is a priority. In terms of implementation, all stakeholders going forward would need to engage Nigerians and stakeholders, make clarifications, and actually so that everyone understands the details. that are necessary for the implementation. But the assurance is that this is part of implementing national security strategy. Government believes strongly that technology is at the root of the solutions that we seek.
All right.
We'll pursue this.
Thank you so much, Zachary Mijinyawa, Head Strategic Communication Office of the National Security Advisor. Good to have you. Thank you so much for your insight on the program. Of course, we do appreciate Dr. Chukwuemeka Ujam, MNI, IT Security Strategy Expert and former House of Reps member, also former Security Architect for the Metropolitan Police in the UK. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Thank you for your time. Jared Ilukwe, ICT Policy Expert. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank
you.
So,
of course, that's Good Morning Nigeria this Friday. Many thanks for being a part of it. Enjoy your weekend. I'm Yen Ray John.
And I'm Victor Azu. Thank you very much for keeping us company. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend.